Calling to order the joint meeting this evening of the Fairfax Town Council and the Fairfax Climate Action Committee. We will be having a special council meeting that will start at 7:30, but this meeting is a special meeting to discuss the climate action plan between these two groups. So calling that meeting to order, and can we begin with a roll call? Renee?
Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you check your sound? I think you have an echo.
Yeah, I think that's the room I'm in. There's
Okay.
not much I can do about it.
Okay,
It
check.
might be David and Kiki if they're in the same room.
Also, could people turn off your sound if you're not using it?
That's always a good idea to keep muted when we're just listening. Yeah. So Michelle, do we do a roll call for this
Yes,
meeting? Okay.
yes, we do, because it's an official meeting. So I will call the roll for the town council, and I'm hoping that Joanne Lanier will do the roll for the Climate Action Committee. So starting with Councilmember Kohler.
Here.
Councilmember Goddard.
Here.
Councilmember Cutrano.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hellman.
Here.
And Mayor Ackerman.
Here.
All the town councils present. Thank you.
Okay, and roll call for the Climate Action Committee. David. I see you here. Jody. Tim.
Here. I'm here.
Walt Vernon.
Here.
Here. Thank you. Jennifer Hammond.
Here.
And let's see, Beth Vertical.
Here.
And Kiki Laporta.
Here.
Awesome. And Chris Lang. Not here. And I am here. And I don't think I have to recall Bruce or Stephanie to order at this point.
As the council representatives on the Climate Action Committee.
Thank you.
And we also have Christine O'Rourke available for questions, and she works with MSEP and has been very, very much involved in helping us with our climate action plan draft, which is what we'll be reviewing tonight. Okay, so in lieu of a staff report, we have a presentation, which I believe Walt will be sharing his screen to show a presentation to begin our looking at the climate action plan. Walt?
Thank you, Bruce. So Garrett, you're going to do I can share my screen, but I think Garrett's going to do it.
This is the town clerk. I just wondered, Mayor, if you wanted to ask for a motion to approve the agenda and affidavit of posting.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yes. Yeah, I would be happy to hear that motion. The agenda is very simple.
So I will move to approve the agenda and affidavit of posting.
Second.
Okay, a roll call vote on that then, please, Michelle.
Sure. Councilmember Kohler.
Aye.
Councilmember Cutrano.
Aye.
Councilmember Goddard.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hellman.
Aye.
And Mayor Ackerman.
Aye.
Thank you. It'll be just a moment before we get the screen share going, I believe.
Will we do the land acknowledgement? Or no?
I could read the land acknowledgement right now while the screen share is getting going. Yes. The Fairfax Town Council acknowledges that we are located on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok people of present-day Marin County. We honor with gratitude the land itself and all of its ancestors, past, present, and emerging.
Okay, shall we start?
Yes, please.
Well, before you start, just a brief announcement. This is Barbara Kohler. I just want to mention that tomorrow night at the Marine Clean Energy MCE meeting, there will be 3 Charles McGlashan Award winners, and one of those is the Fairfax Climate Action Committee. So that will be after consent. So if people are interested in seeing the award ceremony, which will be on Zoom, please call in, and you can check MCE's website for that information. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad you said that, Barbara. And I think in some ways it goes to what an amazing job the original Climate Action Committee of this town, which many of you were on and started, did, because you were able to achieve your goals early and to exceed your goals, which I think is helpful to remember as we look at this particular set of goals, because they are, of course, it's a difficult set of goals we got in front of us. And yet I think we've shown that we can do it. All right, so let's go to the next slide. The way we've structured the meeting, obviously, and I think this is clear to everybody, is that we're going to do a quick presentation. Then we'll have questions and answers that Jody will lead from the council, and then obviously public comments and council comments. Next slide. When Jody finished a couple of weeks ago, right, she finished with this slide talking about how doing this is going to take us coming together, really, not just the Climate Action Committee, not just Sustainable Fairfax, the town council, the staff, the people of this town. And that, I think, is really, really important. And we hope we're starting that process here tonight. Next slide. You know, I didn't want to do a whole lot of climate change stuff, but I did want to remind us that the science is clear, that we are paying for this situation now, and that the most recent study said we need the equivalent of a COVID emissions drop every 2 years if we're going to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So although it may seem like a tall mountain to climb, the alternative is worse. So I encourage us to stay focused. Next slide. So I did want to just sort of review the fact that this climate action plan really is the culmination of 18 months of effort by many, many volunteers, all of whom are on the screen. And I will give special credit to Jody, who led the team that put this thing together. We obviously had the support staff from MSEP. That's Christine, who's on the call with us today, and she's been invaluable to us. One of the things we worked hard to do was try to understand what other towns were doing, what the county was doing, how we could plug into those efforts and extend them. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We did run a survey of town residents. We received about 110 responses, which were very helpful, in which we tried to plow many of them into the plan. We held 4 public meetings of Zoom to try to solicit engagement. And so we worked hard to try to improve, to gather input from the town. And I did want to, let's go to the next slide and let's talk about sort of what's in the plan right now. So you've all had the plan. I know some of you have read it, and I hope all of you have read it. Maybe it's a good antidote if you have insomnia. I don't know. I hope not. But it is pretty comprehensive. It's interesting. I was talking to somebody who's also working on a climate action plan in another town, and they're looking at ours and they're saying, wow, you guys have a lot of stuff in there that sections that we weren't even thinking about that we want to adopt. And so we did start with a whole section on outreach and engagement and thinking about how we help the people of this town to understand the tools and resources that are available so that they can both become part of helping us solve this problem and have access to resources so that this isn't just some kind of a punitive thing. We have a number of measures around transportation. Each one of these, you know, in my left-hand column there, I say the number of strategies. Those are sort of broad strategies. Under each of them is nestled a number of specific items, but broadly speaking, transportation, and that actually is our biggest issue, as we've talked about before. And so it is our biggest challenge in many ways to if you think about decarbonizing our transportation sector, I mean, that really does mean no gas cars, right? Which maybe is a scary thought, but doesn't need to be. Energy efficiency, we had 7 strategies, and that's clearly an important one, because as we talk about electrifying and needing to eliminate natural gas, the idea of reducing the amount of energy that our buildings consume will help it to be more affordable, right? Every watt that we don't have to spend in the first place is by far the most effective watt we can take care of. So a number of things around energy efficiency, although interestingly enough, that doesn't do a lot for us in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions. That's partly because of the greening of the grid, right? The electrical grid is getting greener already. So if you reduce electrical energy, it doesn't really help with emissions, but it helps with cost. So it's important nonetheless. Then we have a whole section on renewable energy and electrification. And so this essentially means we have to stop burning natural gas in our buildings. And that's another scary thought, but feasible and doable. And we can talk about some details later if you want to. But that is the other major piece that we have to deal with. Waste reduction, water reduction, sequestration. These are also important items for different reasons, but not so big in magnitude in terms of the savings. So this will be difficult. And I want to talk about the sequestration for a second. One of the things that is fairly clear is that no matter what the town of Fairfax does, by ourselves, we cannot get all of our emissions to zero. And I'll just give you one little example. And it has to do partly with the way the accounting is done for greenhouse gas emissions. If somebody drives a gasoline-powered car into Fairfax, that counts in our inventory. If an employee drives a gasoline car into our town, that counts in our inventory. And we can't very well say, put up barriers at it's not Sir Francis Drake, but whatever our new name will be, and say, no entry to gas cars, right? So if we're going to get to zero by 30, some amount of offsets to make up for what we cannot do is going to be required. So just for whatever that's worth, I did want to mention that. The other thing, well, maybe that's enough about that. So let's go to the next slide. I want to talk for a second about public comments. We've had the plan up on our website for a couple of weeks. We've gotten a number of comments already. We're hoping to get additional comments through April 30th. Next slide. And what's been heartening to date is that although we've got some, and I'll talk to you about the problems that we're seeing or the things that people are worried about, but we've gotten no comments saying it's not a problem. Next slide. We've got no comments saying we shouldn't be doing something about it. And we got no comments saying we shouldn't hold on to this goal. And so I think that's really encouraging. The kinds of comments we're getting are, oh my God, my numbering messed up. I'm sorry. But that lots of people can't afford this. And we're going to talk about cost in a minute. That the town needs to lead by example. Somebody said, a couple of people said, hey, we just bought new gas heaters. What are we supposed to do? We don't want to have to throw out our brand new gas heater. We'll talk about that. A lot of people are worried about their gas stoves. We'll talk about that. PSPS events, of course, are high on everybody's mind, so that's a thing. And interestingly, we had a number of people who said, you should put in more requirements. And that's partly because, I want to talk about this for a second, our plan does not really account for what we called, I forget the term we used, but the embodied energy in the stuff we buy. And so we haven't addressed, should we outlaw Amazon coming in here with packages and stuff, right? And that's because of the protocols that we use for accounting for our greenhouse gas inventory. So I think everybody will be delighted to know that we're not planning on putting more requirements in than we've already got. So hopefully that will give a slight bit of comfort. All right, so let's start with the first issue. And yeah, next one, thank you. If you read my blog, let's go to the next slide. Garrett, you're really good. This is, you and I have a rhythm. This is wonderful. I sort of use this Dwight Eisenhower thing that in preparing for battle, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And that's in some ways because our history has shown us that things will change over time, right? And so what we're putting out there today is our best estimate for what it's going to take us to get to 0 by 30. But we know things will change, and we know we will flex and adjust. And we know that everything that's in the plan today, or maybe I should say it a different way, nothing that's in the plan today has force of law in a sense, that you guys at the town council will have to implement things over time. And what we're thinking at the Climate Action Committee is that what we want to do is help you implement things and help you figure out for each particular thing, how do we do it in a way that works for the people of this town and that doesn't ignore the issues of cost and other kinds of things. Next slide. One of the things we do want to talk about and note is that technology is clearly our ally here, right? The cost per watt of solar panels is falling, the cost per watt of battery is falling. Next slide. So that will help us and will arrange things. Already today, this is a database that the federal government puts out. This is a very small piece of all the financial incentives that are available today in the town of Fairfax or the state of California to implement things. And so there are resources already. And if you go to the next slide, one of the things that we're going to do, we added a page on our Climate Action Committee website where we're going to start to do a better job about promoting and teaching and making accessible some of these financial tools so people can do them even if we haven't put it in the plan. Next slide. And the other thing that we're talking about in the plan clearly is that this isn't just Fairfax. There are other people who are working on this plan, and we want to coordinate, we want to build upon, we want to cooperate and take advantage of incentives, whether it's at the county, the state, the federal level, and all of those entities are moving in this direction. Next slide. So some people said the town needs to lead by example. And I think we agree with that. We've talked about that before. That is in the plan, and there's lots of opportunities for us to do that. So we look forward to that. Some people said, what if we just bought our new gas heater? And clearly, right, we're not intending to go in and create great difficulties for people. So we want to look at ways to feather in these programs over time so that they can work for real people and our neighbors. I did mention before the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. They are looking at regulations which will in some ways accelerate this trend. And part of what we want to do in our plan is understand those requirements and prepare the people of this town so that those requirements from outside have less of an impact on us. Okay, next. The gas stove issue, right? A lot of people just aren't familiar with the induction stoves. Cooks love them, and we don't have to spend time on that unless people want to. Next slide. One of the big issues, of course, is the PSPS events, and what are we going to do about that? Clearly, that's going to be an issue. Now, we as the Climate Action Committee of the town of Fairfax have very little power over whether or not there's going to be a PSPS event, but I have been talking with MCE about some microgrid strategies separate from what we've been planning with storage that they're interested in. We will do what we can, certainly, to support our neighbors here in finding ways to protect the climate and protect our health and safety during these PSPS events. Next slide. Okay, so for the people who said we should put in more requirements, what I wanted to, again, sort of emphasize is this is the inventory that Christine does for us every year. And so we have targeted this plan very specifically to focus on what is in this inventory. It is going to be a difficult enough challenge for us to take this to 0 that we didn't want to load up the climate action plan with a lot of other things that were extraneous to this inventory. And so we're very focused on that and don't think we should add a lot more. Next slide. So I guess what I wanted to just finish with is a reminder in a way of who we are in this town and who we have been for generations. And you're all familiar, of course, with what our, I guess I can call them our 4 parents now. have done and have accomplished, and the legacy that they've left us. And I do think the world in many ways looks to us to see what can be done. And I do think, as Don Berwick said when he launched the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, in a way, if not us, who? And if not now, when? And with that, I thank you. And we'll turn it over to Jody for questions. Thank you, Garrett. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, can we get any questions from council members that would help to clarify what we've learned, so that we can then we will go into public comment, and then we'll come back for further discussion about it. So just clarifying questions at this point.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Barbara.
So I have a bunch of comments, which of course I'll wait for, but I do have a question, and maybe it's just a detail question, but on page 32 of the plan, it has a statement that I've read several times and I don't understand it. The state's energy efficiency goals are to have all new residential construction be zero net electricity by 2020, and all new residential and commercial construction to be zero net energy by 2030. So maybe there's a mix up in that sentence. I think you've already talked about new residential, zero net by 2020, and then you talk about new residential by 2030. So maybe you don't have the answer for that now. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but I just wanted to throw that question out, and I'll bring up my comments later. Thank you.
Well, I don't know, Christine, if you have that page pulled up or if you have any comment, but I know your time is limited too. So if you want to address that at all, or anything else that you feel might be useful before you jump off, feel free. Can't hear you though.
Not hearing you.
Looks like you're on mute, or we can't hear you, Christine. You're not on mute, but we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go.
Yes, there we are.
All right. I'm actually going to be able to stay till 6:30. I thought my other meeting started at 6, so
Okay.
that's good news to start off with. And yes, I can respond to that comment. I've got the page up here. So zero net electricity means that right now the state code requires that residential buildings put on solar energy on their buildings. So the idea is that the electricity is going to be netted out by solar energy. Zero net energy by 2030 would also mean that there would be no natural gas consumption. So that's the difference.
Thank you.
Sure.
Renee, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't even begin to thank you all enough, so I'm going to save that. But this is just a question about the process. So going and reading through this, I have many places that I'd love to have a discussion about. Some of the things around waste, some of the transportation questions, some of where data was collected. But I'm assuming, given the time, that this isn't the place we're going to do that. So how would the Climate Action Committee like to receive our very specific comments and some of the questions I can ask tonight, but how do we go further in more depth with you guys? What's that recommendation for us?
So we do have our own website, which is climatefx.org.
Yeah.
And there is a location right there where our plan is and a section for comments. So we definitely invite council members, any community members, to go out into the website there and type in your question or your concern or your idea. We love ideas too. And then we will be trying to respond to those as over the next 6 weeks as best we can. So that would be one place, I would say. And again, I think to some degree, Christine might be able to help answer some of the questions now about kind of just how this whole process goes. We didn't go into a lot of detail, but the template starts pretty much with Christine and others, and then it gets worked through. So questions about sources of data or things like that, Christine could answer, but any other questions you want to ask specifically, I'm happy to, or any of us.
Okay, so I'm just going to assume that anything that we bring tonight is about process and not about the details. And we'll use a different.
If I can say, I would love to have any discussion we have time for tonight about the substance. We probably should keep it on a high level, and we on the Climate Action Committee have agreed that we'll stay fairly quiet tonight because we really want to hear from council. But I'm thrilled, I'm sure we all are, to hear you and Barbara both saying that you have a number of comments and questions. And one way that we can approach that is, as Jody said, you have ways to give input to the Climate Action Committee. And I've been involved in the subcommittee that Jody has led to do this, but I am now not being involved continually in that committee for the reason that it would create a Brown Act problem if I were on the receiving end of your comments, and Stephanie as well. So that's the way that we can handle that, is Stephanie and I will just step back from the actual editing of the document as in response to comments.
Walt, did you want to jump in?
Well, I only wanted to ask, maybe I'm a neophyte at Brown Act stuff, but it does seem to me that if there were a lot of questions that we wanted to work through and have a discussion instead of just putting comments on a website somewhere, we could have another meeting, right, where we could spend time and work through the questions together. And I would certainly welcome that. I think that would, and I suspect others would as well. So if we get to that point, we could talk about that. And that's all I wanted to say.
Any other questions?
Chance, it looks like Chance got his hand up there.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I too have like 1 to 2 dozen substantive questions about the plan, but I think I'll try to address that online. Some of the higher level things that I had questions about, just looking at how this plan compares to Marin County's climate action plan for 2030. I was curious on one thing in particular, the sequestration. We have habitat and restoration and soil regeneration. S2 is that item on page 40 here. And we have estimated carbon sequestered, like not available is we weren't able to get the metric. But I did notice for some restoration work that was called out in Marin County's climate action plan, they did have, at least for riparian habitat, it was the highest potential per acre at 9.16 metric tons of CO2 equivalent per acre per year over the lifespan of 20 years. And I was curious why we left that out in our work versus what the county did with their habitat work.
I can address that because I was involved in the county's climate action plan as well. That sequestration number comes from the development of carbon farm plans in the agricultural areas in Marin County. So since you don't really have those kind of carbon farm plans or those opportunities within the town's borders, that's why it wasn't quantified. It's not the same sort of thing as just, doing habitat restoration in town. So it's a kind of a process where there are experts who would go into the farms and then work out a plan, and it's all about composting and putting composting on rangelands and doing windbreaks in order to prevent soil erosion. I mean, there's a whole host of things that are associated with those GHG reductions. There is an opportunity. One of the programs here is about carbon offsets, and there may be an opportunity in the future to actually invest in those carbon farm plants and provide money in order to get those kind of offsets through that program. But that's very preliminary right now. That's something that they want to develop.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, and I think I did look through all the different plans in the the ag section, but I think specifically riparian habitat restoration, I didn't know if there was really that big of a difference between that and agricultural zones, or that within the town borders. So that was the heart of that question. The other thing was about the bicycling T2. I was just curious if there was a reason why e-bikes were so downplayed and electric vehicles were so played up in the, and I'm not saying played up in a negative way, just the focus was clearly in the transit section on getting people into electric vehicles. But at the same time, on the Transportation Authority of Marin, we have received technical reports about the e-bike growth and projected growth in Marin County, which is substantial in terms of VMT, vehicle miles traveled reduction. Like here we have a reduction in local VMT of 72,000, almost 73,000 vehicle miles traveled. In some of these documents, we're seeing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of vehicle miles traveled, even for small jurisdictions, based on the percentage of trips that are taken with e-bikes as opposed to single occupancy vehicles. So I was curious if that was a choice or based on preference, or if there was a methodological constraint based on what the California Transportation Commission has as like the benchmark for how you assess. Because we looked at bike facilities as the main way of judging that, it seems, but at the same time we used percentages for the walking section too of VMT. So I was wondering if anyone could speak to that.
Well, again, Christine, you may have a comment. We certainly as a committee are very interested in e-bikes and plan to promote them tremendously. But as far as I had understood, there's not an easy way for us to have a metric around that. But do you have anything to add there, Christine?
So the e-bikes are included in T2. The calculation for that reduction is really around, it's an approved methodology from the Air Resources Board that's used, and it's based on number of miles of class 1 and I think it's class 1 and class 3 bike lanes and bike paths. So those bike lanes and bike paths could also be used by electric electric bikes. So it is in a way including the electric bikes. I think it's kind of an old metric, that methodology that was developed before e-bikes. The whole explosion of e-bikes happened. So I think it's probably something that could be, that probably needs to be updated. But again, in this case, we were using an approved methodology to do the calculations. In any event, because all of the passenger vehicles are offset by the assumption that all VMT travel would be done through an electric vehicle, even if it was, we could move some of those emissions reductions from T1 to T2 essentially, but the net result would be the same. So I don't think it really, in the end, would make an impact on the emissions reductions, but and I think that the e-bikes is there. But also the other thing to keep in mind too is that this template was originally developed through the city of San Rafael. We went through a year-long process with the city, and there was a climate action committee there, and we had a lot of subject matter experts came in. And so this template is now being used it was adopted in San Anselmo and the county. And, the e-bike thing has really been over the past year or two. So I think the emphasis isn't maybe in the document, is that, at least in the template, let me say, I don't mean to say this document, as I think it could be, because I agree, that TAM study, which was just released like a month ago or something, really does make a case for a lot more e-bike use going forward.
Great. Thank you. And then just one other thing I caught was in the appendix where we had the breakouts for each of them under R1, which is building and appliance electrification. Elsewhere in the plan, we discuss it as about 9,138 metric tons of CO2e as the reduction in that space. And I think that's even borne out at the start of Appendix B on page 47. And for the actual breakout, the calculation looks like it's 8,583.5 on page 65. I didn't know if there was a reason for that, if that was just a typo that or a miscalculation that I caught, or if that, what was going on there. So.
Yes, I see that. It could just be that, keeps going through a lot of iterations, so it probably just has the wrong page there. So it should be the 9,138. Yeah, we'll correct that. But that's a great catch. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Looks like that might be it for questions at the moment. Stephanie, did you have one?
I just wanted to comment on the TAM study, and if that's public, or I haven't seen it, and I had a question if they had the data by municipality, the forecast data of e-bike usage by municipality. So they have that for Fairfax. That's a question for Chance.
They do not break it down by municipality, but they did a study, a long-term study in Marin, and acknowledged the overall VMT reduction as the percentage of e-bikes increased just as a mode of transit.
Okay.
So I'm happy to share that with the Climate Action Committee.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And it's not to say that we couldn't, as far as all the communication strategy that is in here, I think could and should promote e-bikes. And that's probably was your intent anyway. So thank you for that comment, Chance.
And
that was all I had for now. I have more to say later, but that's all I have right now. Thank you.
If I could, sorry, go ahead, Christine.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to correct something I just said, because I was just looking and trying to figure out what went wrong. There's actually 2 pages that are related to that one R1 that are in the back. So there's a R1A on page 64 and an R1B on page 65, because there's 2 bullet points under that. So you add them together and that's how you get the 9,000. So it is actually in there.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you for catching that with that
Okay.
other. Yeah, 554. I see that.
Continue to have your perfect record of never having made a mistake.
I'm very sensitive.
Very good.
Incredible. Thank you.
Chance, did you have another thought or question?
Yeah, I was just gonna. There was one thing which was to Vice Mayor Hellman's point. The other thing about that technical report that was received by TAM was that not only could it affect communication initiatives, but that report also delineates a variety of other actions that could be taken to incentivize or spur both like through ordinance or through other actions that could be taken, taxes and things like that, to affect incentives for e-bikes and get that to be a higher percentage of overall vehicle miles traveled. So that was that point. I had one other question actually that I had on the front of this packet, which was I've seen other climate action plans address workforce housing or local jobs or things like that to keep overall transit down or vehicle miles traveled down as a pretty cost-effective way of reducing the GHG inventory. And I was curious if that was discussed by the Climate Action Committee, that housing piece of it, in any greater detail.
I would say no. We've pretty much stayed in the lanes that are in this template and worked with them. We all have many ideas about many other things and would love to really probably incorporate a lot more into it, but this is kind of what we've been given and what we're focusing on, which is pretty big bite for itself. But absolutely, there's a lot of other very important factors in including the consumption-based emissions that Walt was referencing before. There's a lot of things that we can do. And this document, again, will change. And every year we put together an action plan that where we pull out of the document the key things to work on that year. And I just imagine the next 10 years, best case scenario, many things change. And this document needs many, many changes because of opportunities, incentives, funding, et cetera, that comes our way as a town and as a species to start to really make a bigger impact as fast as we can.
I would add that there is a program in here, T8, Smart Growth Development, to maintain existing zoning that allows for infill, higher density, mixed use development. The VMT numbers that we get, the projections that we get are actually, they're associated or they come from the Regional Transportation Plan, and that is assuming smart growth. And it's also assuming, like your housing element numbers are going to be made. And so there's reductions that occur through that Regional Transportation Plan. And so I know there are climate action plans that will take credit for smart growth, but I feel like it's double counting because it's actually already showing up in the reduced, the VMT numbers the projections. So that's why it's not called out. And I know just that, like the way it looks, like if you have numbers associated with it, it actually makes it kind of stronger to go ahead and it puts more force behind that program to do it. But again, I just feel like it's double counting. Typically, I do identify that under. Yeah, so it's under table 3, and it says emissions reductions due to smart growth development are embedded in vehicle miles traveled projections utilized in the development of the emissions forecast. In order to avoid double counting, they are not included here.
And I just had one final question, which is related to something you brought up, Jody, which was these yearly reports that the Climate Action Committee produces. And so while some of this stuff is higher level, I'm curious if it's in those annual reports that we say, this amount of money needs to be added to the capital improvement project budget in order to move the needle on this thing that was in the Climate Action Plan. Is that how that typically works?
Yes, and we're really just getting that process started. But yes, we've formed 3 subcommittees based on 3 at least tentative goals that we've set for 2021 to 2022, and those focus on transportation, EVs and e-bikes, electrification, building electrification, and I forgot the third one. But anyway, and we're looking at budget requests in each of those areas right now that we will be bringing before or sending to council for consideration to help fund the projects and the initiatives that are part of next year's action plan, those 3 major goals. And of course, we're open to adjusting those goals, broadening those goals, changing those goals. We'll be presenting them as part of the budget process and then starting work on them come July 1. Well, though we're already started. So for instance, Drive Clean Bay area, of course, is doing a lot around EVs, and we've put a page up on our website with a lot of information about that they're offering. So check out our website to just the general public as well for, as Walt was saying, incentives, information, direction, and dialogue with us. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions from council before we go to public comment? Renee?
I'm diving way deep into the compost right now, but I'm dying to ask this question of you guys. I keep reading in here that methane is 86% more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. I always thought 21%. That's what I tell everyone. So where do we get 86 all of a sudden? Is that just the truth of it?
I think my understanding of that is that the realization that there's been a change, but Christine, I'm sure, can speak to this, but I think there's been a change of understanding that methane isn't a short-lived gas if we're continuing to produce it. So we really need to look at, if we continue to do a certain thing and the methane keeps on coming, then physically it's that much more potent. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I usually use 100-year periods. That's kind of the norm. And it depends on which ICCP assessment report you're looking at. The latest one, AR5, it's 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide on a 100-year period. So this is looking, so the statistics that's being quoted here is the 20-year period. And it is more potent on a shorter time period because it is a short-lived climate pollutant. I didn't write that one, so I can't vouch for the accuracy, but somebody on the committee wrote it, so that's got her hand up. So I would assume that it's correct.
I didn't write that, but I know about methane. So it is an issue of half-lifing. Initially, methane is far more, the 86 number is correct for first-time emissions. The problem is that we keep having methane with fracking. So we're seeing a lot more new methane that has that kind of impact, and we're not seeing it taper off so that we can start to see it half-life and have that 100 years number that you have and use.
Okay, thank you very much. I didn't mean to detour, but I'm curious.
It is important to recognize that when I do the emissions inventories, I am using the 100-year numbers for calculating how the impact of methane, just because it needs to be standard across all of the greenhouse gases.
So would it be better to be consistent in the way we're stating this in this document? I would vote for that, so we don't have, I think we should stay consistent, just a thought.
We should discuss that because there are two different ways to look at methane. Like I said, the issue is it just keeps getting fed into the atmosphere. So we're seeing fresh methane that does have that horrendous multiplier because we keep looking for natural gas.
Yeah, I think it's also, we are happy to incorporate that information into that section and make it clear the difference between the 20-year and 100-year and what's used in the data on this one. So good catch. That's the kind of stuff we love and want to hear more of. So it's not too detailed or whatever. But we do want to get on to public comment if you're ready for that, Council and Mayor.
Ready? Okay, so if we can, Michelle, open to the public comment, and we, based on how many people we have here, I think we could, let's try to, if we can ask the public to really try to keep our comments brief, we'll try to give people 3 minutes at this point, but really try to keep so we can get through as much as we can this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see 2 hands raised right now for public comment, or 3. The first person is Ken Jones, followed by Doug Wilson. And Ken, you're unmuted.
Thank you. First of all, I want to just say that as a Greenbrae resident, I often refer to Fairfax as the place to look for the strongest possible action on the things we want to see. And so that's why I'm here tonight to make a comment. Just to add a little bit to what was just discussed about methane, I've been involved in the anti-fracking campaign for a long time when we were trying to get a law passed in California to stop fracking, to ban fracking. And so we did a lot of study on methane, and it's in 10 to 20 years, it's 86 times more powerful. And when you think about it, when we're looking at, we've got to do something really quick, like by 2030, that's the place you might want to look to get the best bang for your buck. So things like building electrification, getting gas out of homes, that kind of thing. But that wasn't what I was originally planning to talk about. So I just want to again say that the statement about consumption-based emission inventory in a lot of the climate action plans here points out that it is 4 to 5 times more powerful. Again, bang for the buck kind of thing. And if we don't do something about the things that are hurting us the worst, quickest, that we are leaving out something we really need to be doing. So it's one thing to call it out and point it out, but it seems like there should be something in any climate action plan that says, how are we going to address that? Or the steps we might start to take to address that. There is a way, there was a group, coolclimate.org through UC Berkeley. I think they did work with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. It came up with ways to measure. And there's now a company, Eco Data Labs in San Francisco, that is doing evaluations of what the current consumption-based emissions in a particular city, and are even advising cities, they're working with San Francisco on policies that you can come up with to deal with them as a city. So I just urge Fairfax to take the lead and show us the way to do something about those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Doug Wilson, followed by Cindy Yob. Doug, you're unmuted now.
Hello, Doug. You're muted.
Okay.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm an ex, I have to confess, an ex-Fairfax member. We lived there for many years until about 20 years ago. Actually, I was a council member during the 90s. So anyway, thank you so much for your pioneering work here. I've continued to work on climate change. I work for the county, primarily Marine Conservation League. I have a couple of concrete things for you to consider. Talking about the value of EVs. Fairfax is one of 4 cities, so to speak, in Marin County that is not compliant with AB 1236, which basically requires cities to have expedited permitting processes for people who want to put in EV chargers at home. And that's a big hurdle for a lot of people. So the town should be doing that. Doesn't cost much. The second thing is stretch building codes. We're talking about methane and the switch from natural gas to electricity as much as possible. Marin County has a stretch building code, which it would like to use as a template, which it would like other towns to use as a template for their own building codes. And a building code is a good way to do that, to encourage people, actually to require people to make switches to be compliant with the best climate practices. So those are two things that the town might be able to do. At least you should look into those. I haven't looked at all the details, but they're not expensive, but they really do move people along in the right direction, I think. So anyway, thank you so much for your pioneering work. It's great, and I continue to watch you all with pleasure. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug, and for your work as well.
The next speaker is Cindy Yob, and I don't see any hands after Cindy. So if someone does want to make a comment, please raise your hand. Cindy, you're unmuted.
Oh, can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyway, this is Cindy Ross here. Cindy Yob is just my screen name here. And I really want to thank the Climate Action Committee for taking on such a big and important task. And I'm also hoping to bring up something that's maybe a little bit smaller, a little bit more, personally or immediately of concern to me. and in line with, Fairfax's, what I think of Fairfax's motto of thinking globally but acting locally, I'm wondering if I could ask you to maybe look at taking some action. It's something that some of you, I believe, are already aware of, has been negatively impacting me and my immediate environment. I know that I actually sent, I don't know if he recalls this, but I had a few online exchanges with Walt Vernon a couple of months ago, and then for some reason I wasn't able to make the climate action meeting online that night. But I've been doing some research, maybe not 100% scientific at this point, I don't know that much about emissions and carbon and some of the scientific stuff, but I have been doing some reading about the problems of chemically scented perfumes, laundry products, those kinds of emissions and the volatile organic compounds that they release. And I've read a couple of articles, including a study from 2011 at the University of Washington, and also something that was reported by the New York Times in 2018, saying that there does seem to be a real connection between the release of these volatile organic compounds and smog and air pollution and negative impacts on climate change. And I would like to ask the council and the town of Fairfax to look into banning chemically scented laundry products and similar emissions that are, negatively impacting not only my health, but also polluting the environment. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
The next speaker is Alec Schuldener, followed by Mark Bell. Alec, you're unmuted now.
Thank you. I live in Fairfax. Some of you know me from some of the downtown opening efforts, and I've spoken with you all before. I also contributed to, or at least had a few comments to make for a couple of the sessions that went into developing this document. I think it's a very good document, but I just want to make one sort of meta comment about it, which is that there's a lot in the document about encouraging changes in behavior, which is sort of very in keeping with the spirit of the town and the sort of cautious hand that I think the council generally tries to apply as it's shaping public opinion and shaping the direction of things. While that's in keeping with our approach, our sort of traditional approach in the county, is absolutely not in keeping with the nature of the climate emergency that we face. So given that there is a very, very long list of recommendations in this document, and that some of them are along the lines of encouraging, but a few of them, especially things having to do with permitting and things of that sort, are along the lines of requirements. And given that, frankly, there's limited time and attention for such a long list of different things to do, I would just like to encourage the council and the town in general to focus on those things that force people to make changes in their behavior and their purchasing and their installations and their, what have you. Those are the things that are going to have the most certain impact, and they're in general the sorts of things that strike me as most in keeping with the nature of the emergency. I'll just say one other thing, since I see I've got an extra minute there, which is that as somebody who lives on a creek and who has done a major remediation project on the creek, I am very tempted, and I've actually raised this in previous meetings, to sort of plead for creek restoration as a means of booking greenhouse reductions for the town. But I also am aware that there is a lot of uncertainty in these sorts of calculations. And I think relying on credits of any kind, of any actions which allow us to say, well, okay, well, we've done something better here and that offsets the emissions we have someplace else. I just think that always needs to be taken with a real large grain of salt. Thank you. And good work.
The next speaker is Mark Bell. Mark, you're unmuted.
Hi. The city of Oakland just put forth a comprehensive ban of gasoline leaf blowers. And if you want to talk about some immediate action that can help the environment, that would definitely be an incredibly easy fix to have implemented. Doesn't take a whole lot. As I said, it's incredibly comprehensive, covers all bases, and I think that's something that you should seriously look at. On more of a global issue, and I don't know if you have associations with people, if you can contact other organizations or whatever. However, looking at the big picture, European appliances use 30 to 50% less energy for the exact same quality of appliance, whether it's refrigerators, ranges, etc. And when you look at European companies, they are either all or partially owned by US companies. So they already have the technology that they're employing in Europe. And I would imagine that retooling to actually bring that technology here wouldn't be a big deal. And this is borne out by, in many instances, an example is that years ago, we rented a Volkswagen Passat turbo diesel, drove it either at 20 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour, never at 55 miles an hour, and still got over 45 miles to the gallon. When they brought the same car to the United States, it was EPA rated at 26 miles per gallon. How is that? They changed the gearing or they did some other modification to lower what you could actually get. And I don't think it was just because of emissions at that time. So as I said, I don't know how far reaching your connections are, but if you want to look at a major global effect would be to force US appliance corporations to employ the same standards that they do in Europe. And you'll see a significant reduction in the need of energy production. And that would be a tremendous help. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Is there anyone else who would like to offer a comment? I see a hand. Alexis Steinman, you are unmuted now.
Good evening, Alexis.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks. I just wanted to call in really quickly, speaking as myself and only on behalf of myself, just to say that we have a group in San Anselmo, a subcommittee of our Sustainability Commission that's actually working on amending and updating our climate action plan. And we have really been looking to what you all are doing, and specifically the targets and the scope of reductions, because I think it's really the only plan in Marin that's aligned with what climate scientists are saying is necessary. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And some San Anselmo folks, including myself, are really appreciative that you guys are looking at this tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Please raise your hand.
Jen?
So seeing none, we can bring this back to the joint meeting. And I think really, again, the focus of this meeting on the behalf of the Climate Action Committee is mostly to hear council. And so though we won't have time to go into all the details, I'd love to hear council's thoughts in general and any concerns and maybe ideas for next steps as well.
So I have a question, but I believe Jen Hammond has had her hand up for quite a while.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. You had your virtual hand up? I'm looking at.
There we go. Hi, everybody. Just responding to the prior speaker's concern about behavior change and how important it is that we all make changes on an urgent basis. I wanted to let everybody know I'm actually the outreach, the communications and outreach associate for Resilient Neighborhoods. And in strategy number 1 in the climate action plan is community outreach and engagement. And Resilient Neighborhoods is a partner with the town, and it is a Marin County nonprofit, a project of sustainable Marin. We're endorsed by Drawdown Marin. We work with MSEP, so we're a real presence in Marin County. And it's a way, you know, it can be kind of overwhelming for somebody who wants to make the right changes, the positive changes in all these different areas and all these different strategies. And so this Resilient Neighborhoods brings groups of people through this program. It's 5 meetings online, used to be in person, but because of COVID, we converted it to online. And it's a great way just to work with your community and learn about all these different actions you can take in a detailed way, and be provided with the local resources and help to be able to do these things, and look at what are the different actions, the different things you can do that are going to have the greatest impact. So I'm happy to say we have 2 teams coming up, and we're focusing Fairfax on Wednesday, March 31st for the first meeting, 6:30 to 8:30. Sustainable Fairfax and the Fairfax Climate Action Committee are both going to have members on this team, and we're putting the word out to the community to join us. And so we'd love to have as many Fairfax people on that team. And of course, it's open to anybody in Marin County, so you don't have to live in Fairfax. But it's a great way to kind of, for Fairfaxians to connect with your local groups working on climate and connect with each other on these important issues. So we also have another team, if that time doesn't work for you, starting next week on Thursday, March 25th from 4 to 6. Again, these are 5 meetings bi-weekly over 10 weeks. You can sign up on resilientneighborhoods.org website, on the Fairfax Climate Action Committee website, or the Sustainable Fairfax website. All have links to both of these teams. And if anybody has any questions, just
and Jen, don't forget to say it's free.
It's free. So that's one thing that makes this program really unique, is that you get a lot of important information and attention for free. And it's also unique in that you're going to take these actions, or commit to taking these actions, and it's quantified for you. So you'll be able to say, okay, I'm doing these actions, so I'm going to reduce this many pounds. We also focus on emergency preparedness. So as we're coming into the wildfire season, that's something that's on people's minds. And so we'll help you get prepared, if you haven't already, for wildfires and power outages and such. It's a great program. A lot of people, I'm looking at the list here, have gone through the program. Over 1,500 people have in Marin. So this is a really good time to do it.
Thank you. Yeah, I've gone through the program. It is highly recommended. You should go for it. Thank you, Jen. So council members, Barbara, you were beginning.
Yeah, I had. Rather than go through the details, I did provide my detailed comments to Jody, and maybe she can share those with the folks working on the update. But I do want to hit some of the high points. Well, first of all, I want to thank the subcommittee and the Climate Action Committee for all their hard work. I know this was not easy, and I know it was months upon months, and you guys did a lot of outreach. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm sure our community is too. I have a couple of comments that maybe are high level comments. And some of the things that are talked about in this document in several places is offsets. And one of the prior speakers said something about offsets. So I actually work in this field. And a couple of things that I think Walt and I have had a little conversation about this as well offline is one of the things that's mentioned in here is having people buy offsets themselves. And there is a figure in here of $20 a ton. Actually, the cost of voluntary offsets is less than $5 a metric ton and going down on a daily basis. But part of the concerns I have about offsets is, I don't know how we're going to hit this zero, frankly. And offsets is one way to get there. But I have a lot of concerns about offsets being regular folks working to try to do this. Projects are often done in other countries. Those countries will not be consistent with California requirements. So for example, something that might be done in Africa or even in other states like Texas would not be qualified for offsets in California because they're already required by law. Another problem so they're not called additional. So the other problem you have is a lot of projects never get built and you don't know. So I think there's a lot of liability with the town getting involved with requiring people to buy offsets. I explored a pretty big project for an agency that had paid for some offsets a number of years ago, and they did a lot of due diligence. That project was never built. So there's a concern there. But I'll be frank, I don't know how you're going to get to zero by 2030 without doing it that way, but there's a lot of, excuse the expression, crappy stuff on the offset market. And even if it's not, even if they're good projects, as I said before, projects in other states, we already have laws that require a lot of that stuff here. So they wouldn't be eligible for projects in California. I think Bruce had a question about that.
I was just going to say, we don't have time to get into it tonight for sure, because we have 18
right.
minutes left.
Well, that's why I'm just hitting a few of the high points.
But
the
just
other,
that with offsets, one possible concept would be local offsets. So just that's a big topic to discuss, but just
right. And they're pretty expensive to do. The other issue is some of what's talked about is Marin Carbon Project. I worked with Marin Carbon Project. They do not have any offset projects. They don't plan to do so because they're too expensive for them. And I just checked their website. Bay Area Air Quality Management District paid them a lot of money to bring in projects. They never brought them in because they feel they're too expensive to run. That's why they're just doing these carbon farms, which are not offset. So there's some concerns with that. A couple of things. There is some discussion about requiring renewable diesel as a transition fuel. I wouldn't advocate for that because renewable diesel tends to have high NOx, which is ozone precursor, criteria pollutant. There's other things that I have concerns about, some of the point of sale things that you all are talking about. There was something about at point of sale or at resale, changing out all plumbing. That will kill a lot of deals. Changing plumbing is a big deal. A few years ago, I brought changing the toilet flush rate as something we already had a point of sale requirement, and changing a toilet is maybe $100 to $500. We had a lot of pushback, and we made a little change to that. Small things like that are workable, but changing entire plumbing in housing is probably a little unrealistic. And I think one of the things that I really admire you all for talking about is wanting to be equitable. And I think some of the measures in here that are intended as requirements, because you all feel they're very necessary, may not be so equitable for some of our community members who don't have the kind of resources that others might. So those are just a few comments. I do want to say you guys did a great job, and I completely appreciate it. if Jody wouldn't mind sending my comments on to the group, because there were a few qualifying things and other things that I don't think there's time to discuss tonight. If you guys would consider that, and I'm happy to do follow-up if you need it, to discuss them. And my stuff obviously isn't perfect, and you guys did an incredible job. So thank you.
Thank you. Who else? Council? Any comments?
Go ahead, Renee.
Oh, no, you go. I saw your hand. I was going to wait.
Yeah, I don't want to get into too much detail, but I just want to thank the subcommittee that worked so hard on this. I've learned so much through you, and I'm still learning. A couple of comments in response to the public and Barbara. Let me just make sure I'm looking at my notes here. So I believe it was Doug Wilson's comment. We are intending to pursue a ban on natural gas, and that is on the horizon. The REACH codes is something that we looked into and determined it didn't make sense, really, from a timing and execution standpoint. But that will be on a council meeting in the near future. So if you want to tune in for that discussion. I couldn't agree more with Alec in terms of this being an enormous change management initiative. So much of this is going to require all hands on deck, and that's going to require, partnerships from different organizations across Marin. It's going to take a huge communication strategy and really put our money where our mouth is, since we signed and approved the climate emergency resolution. And, we have a retreat coming up where we are going to talk about our priorities, and hopefully we'll all be aligned in unison that this action plan is a priority. And ultimately, when we get to talk about budget, we will prioritize funding what it's going to take as well. And Barbara, as far as the offsets, I don't know nearly as much as you do about it. It's a fascinating market, and I would imagine I'm not interested in really moving the goalpost right now when we haven't even gotten started. I think we can have that conversation, and I'm sure there's some lower risk carbon offsets that we can explore. And to your point about our community members that can't afford some of this, we know there's financing out there. We also talked about grant opportunities, so we are well aware of our, like I said, community members that cannot afford some of this, and we are very sensitive to that. So I think that's all I wanted to say, although I think there was the EV item as well, which we've already taken care of, right? Well, yeah, we've done that one as well. So I'm just really humbled by the excellent work, and I thank you all. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Renee?
Absolute echo of gratitude to all of you, and it's tremendous. I don't have the expertise. I felt as though I had expertise in certain areas for a long time, but this is absolutely blowing me away. And so I have more questions than comments, actually, and a few suggestions. But I want to thank Walt. He's been talking to me about this since I've known him, which is a long time. And the way you have executed and supported this committee and brought this to us is humbling and inspiring. So thank you. I wanted to start actually with a question about MCE at this point. So I know that we have high numbers, or perhaps the highest in the service area for deep green members. But I understand that that percentage is still really low. So do we know the number? And I'm relating this to a section under the renewable energy on page 28 of the plan, where it says that considering that MCE currently carries 78.6 of the total electricity load in Fairfax, I just want to see if I understand. So we all are light green if we don't opt out. Can you still opt out of light green?
Okay, yes. So
let me finish the whole thing, and then maybe
okay.
put it in context for me or Walt can. I'm wondering, I guess this is just restating that if only 78.6 of our total electricity load, is that because the differentiation between light green and deep green and the fewer numbers of folks signed up for deep green?
No, so there are still people signed up for PG&E and they had to opt out to go to PG&E. So you're in, when Fairfax joined, everybody is in light green unless they opt out, and people have the opportunity to opt out. You can also opt out tomorrow. And then if you want to get back in, you have to wait like a year to come back in.
So that to clarify, that's the 19.7% that are still solely PG&E customers.
Right. And then the percentage right now, the last time I checked, of our customers that are deep green, which is 100% renewable, is 8.6, which is higher than any of the other jurisdictions by quite a bit. And then, yes, it's still not 20. But also remember, light green right now is 60% renewable, but it's 90% carbon free. And next year it will be 95% carbon free. So renewable and carbon free are not the same thing. So just so you know. And so those are the answers to MCE issues. And yes, people can opt out if they want to and go back to PG&E.
Okay, thank you. I guess my suggestion then is, and I know this has been tried, I remember being out there at the library with Bruce when they did the farmers market back there and signing up one person at a time and having at Streets for People the table where you could do it remotely and you help people through it. But 8% is just not going to cut it. And it's a massive bang for our buck. So I really would like to see focus on something as simple as really bumping up those numbers. It's not simple, but it could be simple as part of the outreach campaign. One question or just comment, if on page 35, where you guys go through the waste section, I just wanted, we do have ordinances that cover some of the things that you are saying should be ordinances. So I just wanted to point that out. And I can send you those code sections so that you can make sure that you have that clearly represented in the plan. That was a big deal. But to your point, maybe you didn't find them because nothing's been done with them, because we have enforcement issues whenever we try to do things. So to some of the public asking for more requirements of the public, we have to do that carefully and very smartly in terms of how we inform people. Many of the things we need to do require enforcement, but first you have to audit the behavior that's actually occurring, and we've run into trouble with that. So we need to get some community support for this work and all the pieces and parts that might seem invasive at times to audit someone's waste behaviors, but it is the way we're going to move the needle and find out. We don't know what people don't know until we look and see. So that's one piece. A question I had is about the transportation piece at section T4 in that grid on page 24. And I'm wondering how you guys are measuring safe routes to schools, because it's got a number next to it. And it seems to be the only part of that that is actually a program versus an actual piece of the greenhouse gas emission puzzle. So I would like to understand and also offer to add some newer information around no idling campaigns and some of the things that Safe Routes is working on currently. So I'm happy to interject some of that and send it online. And one other thing, I have more, but I'll send it. But this one I really wanted to put out there, and that is that about 10, 15 years ago, one of our businesses in towns that shall not be named got their green business license certification, and I went and celebrated with them when they received it. And they put some signs up, and they put 2 waste receptacles in that had the wrong signage, and nothing ever from that point on happened with them. No one checked in. There was no recertification that anyone, So here's my whole point of that is not to bash the green certification program at the county, but why not look at a local one? Why not, we talk about stickers in windows a lot, but this would be something that would really create metrics for the businesses to meet and allow us to outreach directly to them on all these different measurable metrics and then create our own green business certification program here. And I think it would go a long way. And I'm just going to stop at that. Last thing, e-bikes. If you're looking, and it sounded to me, and maybe I didn't totally understand this, but Christine talked about some of this, the e-bike usage and VMTs is related to the class 1 and class 3 bike lanes and infrastructure that exists. It's a whole new world of where e-bikes can and can't go. Class 1 e-bikes, class 3 e-bikes not allowed on multi-use paths, and everyone's taking the roadway. So we need to really look at a whole new way of measuring that and really lifting that up. And I will say that 4 out of 5 of us council members are now on e-bikes, and the one who's not is Barbara Kohler, who rides a non-e-bike and puts the rest of us to shame. So we are happy to model that for the community. It's life-changing, obviously. So anyway, thank you guys. 10 trillion, can't even express it enough.
So much detail to get into, but thank you for those comments. Yes.
Chance has a comment.
Chance?
Yeah, just really quick. I'm mindful of the time. I also want to give a super shout out to all you in the subcommittee that worked on this, because it's huge, I think, for the public watching. A lot of other big cities or medium-sized cities might have a climate action plan that's 20 pages, 30 pages maybe. So to have this much depth just shows how great our committee is in terms of getting really into the nuts and bolts of how we get to carbon neutrality or net negative carbon by 2030. And 2 things real quick. Renee, to your point, I think the answer to your question about safe routes is on page 53. They're looking at overall school population miles traveled, and then they look at the % reduction and then figure out the VMTs avoided from that. But the other thing to Doug Wilson's question about our compliance with EV charging, just for the public's knowledge, actually at our March 3rd meeting, we did pass or replace Town Code section 15.04.065, which brings that back. We inadvertently removed it at some point, but it does make it now that EV charging station installation applications could actually be acquired over the counter, like a regular building permit or similar non-discretionary permit. So if you want one, you just go down to Town Hall.
I believe it's at no cost as well.
Yeah.
So the town has done, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and then the other thing I just wanted to highlight again, I can't wait to give more comments on the riparian sequestration stuff and bicycle, specifically e-bikes. But I did want to highlight on page 25, y'all bring up the fund EV zero emission vehicle strategy and projects while disincentivizing gasoline cars. And you give like a pretty interesting, very specific approach to that. And that was sort of a question I asked earlier is, when do we keep it high level? When do we dig in? And I know that we have limited time and we're taking comments currently over the next 6 weeks. But as we take comments, I just want to encourage the Climate Action Committee, if you all have specifics for particular areas of this where you think it really moves the needle the quickest, if that means, you know, we need a part-time staff person or to share a full-time employee in the Ross Valley to really prioritize this and be the top high-level person that looks at it and then figures out how to embed it in public works or embed it in other staff positions, bring it. Please bring it. Please include some of those specifics for us, because I think it'll help as we try to move the needle over the next decade to achieve these goals, to have specific things to look at so we don't get, you know, bogged down in discussions in the future that are like, well, you know, we don't even, it's so ambiguous, we don't really know how to approach it yet. So we need to spend time figuring that out. So that's just the other encouragement. And I look forward to working with you all on it.
Absolutely. And there certainly has been discussion. I think that was kind of what Alexis was referring to in her comment, that San Anselmo is interested as well in possibly working with us to share a staff person, try to figure out some way that we can get attention from somebody day in and day out on the details of this, because as a volunteer committee, the Climate Action Committee has stretched itself out to write this draft and is now wondering the same thing. How do we really do the sustained work to implement it in detail?
We'll get it done.
Can I just ask for clarification on one thing?
Yes.
And it may be that I need this from Alexis, and I don't even know if she's here, but I understood that the Climate Action, that their Sustainability Commission already brought the updated CAP to their council. Wasn't it more recently approved with its update?
We could get Alexis on to answer that if that's a question we want, because Alexis is still here with us.
Okay. I'm just curious, as she said, they're still working on amendments, and that would be a great place for us to overlay the work that's being done here.
Well, I think that would be a good idea if you can bring Alexis in.
I'd be happy to.
Sorry, Alexis, if you're not ready for this.
No, she has her hand up. So
Okay.
Alexis,
Good.
you're unmuted.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So the answer is yes and yes. The council did approve a 2019 climate action plan, and I think June of 2019, right before I joined. Some of the discussions that the Sustainability Commission has been having basically just sort of recognize that our target emissions reductions and target dates aren't consistent with the scientific reality that we're up against. And so we're basically trying to sort of revamp it, create more clear guidelines around implementation and priorities, as well as the kind of funding that is going to be required. We are coming up against the issue of offsets and struggling with a lot of what Barbara has sort of talked about. But on the other hand, it just doesn't seem like there's any other way to really get there if we're not sort of willing to take a look at those and talk about those. But that's very hypothetical. I think right now the focus is just identifying really where can we reduce as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And then we'll sort of worry about what to do with the remainder at the end. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you for hanging around, and thanks for the info.
So we are a little past 7, and be happy to continue this discussion for a few more minutes, but we should definitely, Michelle tells me, definitely be finished by 7:15, because then we have to get all switched over and ready for our next meeting. So final comments or thoughts about next steps?
I just think we should adjourn and have people send their comments to the Climate Action Committee, and then if they want to follow up, they can follow up with us individually or in some other form.
Mm-hmm.
That just makes the most sense to me. And you know, I think we can beat this to death, as we tend to do with a lot of stuff. No offense, not me. Oh, I do too.
I'm completely willing to beat this one because I have so many questions, and these guys have been waiting forever for us to get together. So I do have a question, or I would love just a really layperson's explanation of the internal price on carbon that, Walt, I know you've been talking about. It is different than a carbon offset kind of model, but there is something similar, and I wondered what if you could give us.
This is one of those creative ideas that I meant when I said we could think about local offsets. There's some really.
That's what I thought. So I just wondered, it might be good to hear from your mouths instead of doing some kind of email and exchange about that.
Well, why don't you give that an explanation really quick?
All right. Well, the notion, and this is done increasingly by businesses who often, what a business is doing is recognizing the probability of a future carbon tax, that at some point the government will put a price on carbon that they will have to pay for. And so what businesses have started doing is taxing themselves for the carbon that they're using instead of having the government impose it upon them. So essentially they're taking whatever their greenhouse gas emissions are, however many tons there are, and they're, you know, how you set the price is an interesting question. Barbara mentioned some of the issues around offset pricing, and that, you know, how you set your internal price is a trick, but you pick a price and you say, all right, we're emitting however many tons, we are going to essentially set aside a sum of money equivalent to what we would pay as a tax or to buy offsets, if you will, either way. And then they use that money to invest in projects to reduce their emissions. And so we were suggesting something like that. Frankly, that was one of the things that we're going to submit to you as a budget request this year, that we do that. And that we use the money not necessarily to invest in town operation reductions, but potentially to subsidize things that the people of the town of Fairfax might want to do, so that we help the residents, even as we're thinking about, you know, all of the things that we've got to do. But you could use it in a bunch of different ways. Anyway, the essence of it is you tax yourself, and by essentially setting aside a pot of money that you can then use in service to the ultimate goal. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
It starts, which is just right.
Local and being able to see right in front of us that it is being used in the right way, but using that money for mitigation. Yeah.
I have one more thing if no one else does. There's only a place or two, unless I've missed it, where renters are called out in terms of what kinds of actions, changes people who are renting can make. And obviously that's harder with electrification and switching to more renewables because of your infrastructure in your house you don't necessarily have control over. But is there a way to add some more things that really pertain more specifically to renters, or flesh that out a little bit? Only because when we talk about equity and we talk about access to some of these brilliant pieces of our plan, we want to make sure that we're speaking to everyone about what they can do. And we have a lot of renters, and hopefully we'll have more renters going into the future.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I was actually talking to somebody the other day who said that it was a renter, and this person said his landlord paid his natural gas bill, but he paid his own electrical bill. And so I thought that was really interesting, because that means if we have that landlord electrify that property, if you think about it, all that money that the landlord is paying right now for that natural gas is going to have to be paid for by the renter. And so that imposes yet a new burden on a renter. And so we need to think very carefully about these things. I don't really have good answers right now, Renee, but I think as we, and that's one of the things, and I think, I can't remember who said we need to be, it's Chance, right? Specific. As we start to think about how to actually implement some of these problems, some of these policies, we will need to think very carefully about how they affect different groups of people and how we tailor the things that we're thinking we need to do so that we can protect the people who need protection, even as we're trying to reach towards the goals that we need to reach. And so I don't have a great answer, except that we need to electrify the buildings that they're in a way that doesn't hurt them, and if possible, helps them.
And efficiency is very important in that. So, yeah, because it saves cost, and it also, efficiency allows more renewables to be available during the period when we don't have enough renewables for everything that everybody in the country is using. These renewables are valuable. Okay, thank you all. I think we are pretty much coming to the end. So thank you so much.
Can I ask one question, yes. Bruce?
Oh.
Is Joanne supposed to do minutes for this meeting, or is the council doing minutes? It dawned on me, who has to do minutes?
Would you like me to answer that, Mayor? This is Michelle.
Yeah, please.
The town council will have minutes, and we'll just give you guys a copy.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
On our subcommittee, I'm sure that the entire meeting will be listened to in detail. I know I have been not scribbling my notes as frantically as I usually am, because I know I'm going to listen to this completely. Okay, thank you. And public comment is fully open until the 30th of, until April 30th. And one place to give that is on climatefx.org, which is the Climate Action Committee's website. And those comments are actually being read every day and often answered. And for council members as well, any thoughts, any comments you have can go that direction, or go by email to, let's say, Jody. And then we also can certainly consider continuing this discussion at another meeting. So thank you all for the attention. This is really gratifying.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Meeting adjourned. See you at 7:30.